Can you share your opinion about equip load being tied to endurance instead of strength? God, Kisra, where are people like you in the Discord to ask like actually like good questions? Thanks for the questions. I appreciate when I get like interesting question that makes it more interesting for everyone, like subjects to talk about. So, yeah, I've seen a lot of varying opinions on this. Honestly, I'm not too sure what to think of it, because as much as I like the idea of it being tied to strength like it was at first, oops, like equip load being tied to strength, it makes sense for a strength build, because all strength build need to invest into vitality, because all strength weapons weight a lot, so, and you need armor for poise, so the whole thing really makes sense. Now we don't have our hands on the game. Like, I'm sure they saw something build wise that made it so that strength build had it too easy on the point or on the what's it called, like I think they saw something in a sense that it was maybe not expensive enough to make a strength build, right? Like, it was too easy to make a strength build because you had everything you needed in one stat. Just level up strength and you got all the points you need everywhere, right? So I think they made an educated decision that we are not really seeing yet, but I think we're gonna maybe realize why, or maybe we won't realize why, because we won't get to play with the game where strength also affect equip load. But I think having it tied to endurance, because you have to compare it to what you know, right? Having it tied to endurance is akin to Dark Souls 1, and unlike Dark Souls 3 where vitality has its own thing, I think it's a good idea to go back to Dark Souls 1 in a sense that, you know, when you make a build, right, it's always like, if you consider that you have a level cap that you're trying to reach, or that you're trying to build under. So like, for instance, here we're trying to build at 125, so every decision we make, we have to sacrifice something in order to gain something elsewhere. And most of the time, I'm gonna say that the sacrifice you make when making builds are either to endurance or vitality, right? And why is that? It's because those stats affect like really the tangible outcome of your build a bit less than, say, if you were to cut points into vigor, or cut points into like strength or dex. Like, cutting points in strength or dex affects your damage output, like legitimately, just straight up. Whereas when you cut points into endurance, if you don't use your full stamina bar, there's no real effect on it. Of course, you always use your full stamina bar, but still. And same thing with vitality. If you manage to get your build under a specific weight load, like, all the vitality you get as an extra is like, you know, it's not very useful because the defense is not enough to like warrant it. So like, vitality is really a thing where you just use it to reach the armor you want to use with the weapons you want to use. So it makes sense to mix, to put together endurance and vitality in one. And I think it also made sense to have it like they had it before, where strength was tied to vitality, because they go hand in hand, like we mentioned earlier. But with all that said, I think that the reason why they changed it back is probably because they saw that strength build was very stat efficient compared to other builds, perhaps. And given how Elden Ring still has some like small details that are gonna massively affect how large weapons and small weapons are gonna be useful, or how good small weapons are. What I mean is that, you know, in the network test, small weapons were nowhere as good as, like, say, in Dark Souls 3, right? In the network test, the meta in the 15 hours we played was basically Great Lance, and Great Lance was really the only hyper armor weapon that was in the network test. So that alone tells us that small weapons were not really meta in the network test, and so small weapons are nerfed just by the presence of passive poise, even if it's very slight. And so because of that, maybe that gives strength build too much of an advantage, having the equip load tied to strength as well. Because if you want to have a dex build, right? If you want to have a dex build with armor, it's like you have to invest in dex and strength, and that becomes almost like a quality build. So it's like when you're doing that, you're basically saying, I want all, like, if you, when you're tying strength to equip load, you're basically saying, I want all dex builds to be lightweight. And that's not necessarily a change that you might want. Maybe you do, maybe that's the direction you want, but clearly if they decided to go the opposite way, to me that means that they wanted dex builds to have a bit more room to choose how they spec their builds. And so having it tied to endurance, I mean, it makes sense. Like for instance, I'm thinking of my buddy Distant, all his builds have 40 endurance, like all his dex build. He always rocks a dex build with 40 endurance. So endurance and dex can go hand in hand, whereas strength is kind of useless on the dex build. Otherwise, it becomes a quality build. So I can see why they made that change. Am I for it? Honestly, it's too hard to tell because we didn't really get to experience what it felt like to have strength tied with equip load. I think that's going to be a black crystal, by the way. It's just not a lot of people, just people hiding here. So all in all, I'm not against the change, and I'm not complaining about it because I think they made this because it makes sense. That's how I feel. I think they made this decision because it makes sense. Might have been a troll to have strength tied to equip load. No, I don't think so. I think I mean, it makes sense. I don't think that would be a troll because it makes sense. Strength builds need vitality because big weapons and big armor require higher equip loads. So it makes sense to tie it to strength. But on the opposite side, you're kind of forcing every build to invest into strength, and strength is an offensive stat. So it's like you're forcing other builds like dex builds to be a bit more strength heavy if they want to have some defense, and that transforms every single dex build into like a quality like build. And even if you don't need that much strength, like you'd pretty much probably reach 26 strength on all dex build, and again it becomes like 26 strength in some decks is still quality build. You don't need 40-40 to have a quality build. Yeah, exactly. I stored. That's what I think, but I mean, that's just a theory though. Like I said, we don't know because we didn't really get to experience it. We don't know like what weapons are in there, like what possibilities there are for that sort of stuff. Like we didn't even get to try to make a build that, or, like we can't even compare like builds because no one has made builds yet. Like maybe if we could have, like, I don't know, if we could have made like a 120 or 125 build, for instance, in the network test, and compare like how much point investment do you need for a strength build, say, versus a dex build for the same type of defense and damage output, maybe that like we would understand the question better. But since we don't know, it's just impressions, and like it's like just everything's in theory. Okay, oh, okay. What are you doing? Oh, that range, what the fuck? Very strange. Sure here. Strange fella. Hey, what's up, Chris? You're first. How's it going, man? No BS there. He is there though. what's up, guys?